Welcome back to Red vs. Blue episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 42, You're the Bomb, Yo. In the Bard's cell, as the ticking continued, Griff yells out to Max Gain and his team of Reds, hoping they can hear him as he tries to explain that he's Red as well, and doesn't even know Church, begging them to let him out. Church sarcastically thanks Griff for the support and being a team player, with Griff defending that he had to think of himself in this situation, with Church bitterly responding that there's no I in team, with Griff cleverly responding that there's no you either, meaning no one was on the goddamn team anyway, if him or Church weren't, yelling that the team sucks. Church then changed the subject, stating that he didn't understand why the Sidewinder Reds were still stationed there, if Tex already killed all the Blues, wondering why they hadn't pulled out yet. Griff answered that question by stating that as someone who had worked for Red Command for the last few years, he wasn't surprised, knowing how slow, useless, and unreliable Red Command was. Meanwhile, back at the teleporter nexus after knowing the bomb timer was activated, Simmons managed to successfully analyze the teleporters to trace the bomb activation signal to Sidewinder, informing Sarge Caboose of this, also questioning Sarge how much time remained until the bomb went off. Before Sarge could respond, Donut's voice connected once again through the same teleporter as before, which could be heard due to Sarge's device, confirming that everyone in Blood Gulch was willing to transport. In the time between this episode and the last, Sergeant Simmons had contacted Donut again already, telling him about how they had all planned to meet up wherever the bomb ended up being. Not everyone was truly ready to transport, as Donut said, however, as Tucker was still adamant on not going through the teleporter, likely due to his past experiences, stating he was serious. Ignoring Tucker's demands, Sarge simply explained how they had to get to Sidewinder as soon as possible, clarifying if Simmons had said Donut's teleporter to take them straight there with no delays. Simmons assured Sarge that he walked Donut through how to do it, doubtfully adding that Donut said he did everything right, warning that Simmons actually figured they probably had a 50% chance of ending up in Sidewinder or in the middle of deep space. Sarge then questioned if their teleporter was set right, with Simmons assuring that since he programmed theirs himself, they would be fine, safely ending up in Sidewinder. Sarge, now knowing he would be okay, stated how he found the risks acceptable, not caring about the safety of Donut or the Blues. As if on cue, not boding well for his chances of survival, Donut said through the teleporter how he never knew the Phillips screwdriver he used on his side of the teleporter was the X one, questioning if it was named after a guy named Philip, stating how that guy must have had a fucked up shaped head if that were the case, being one of the few times he sweared, with Tucker responding screw this, stating he was going to walk instead, only a quarter joking. Sarge, still content with the risks, instructs Simmons and Caboose to saddle up, cheering for Sergeant Griff not to worry, as the cavalry was coming as he charged through a teleporter, yelling a hi-ya battle cry. Sarge instantly emerges back in the teleporter nexus through the teleporter, beside the one he just left through, still screaming the battle cry, before cutting it off saying, oh, in shock. This leads Simmons, calling Sarge Sir as usual, to awkwardly clarify the location of the teleporter he adjusted, pointing in another direction, insinuating that Sarge went through the wrong one without stating it. Sarge shrugs off his mistake with an oh well, triumphantly beginning to state another battle statement, where warning the evildoers heads up that he, Simmons, and Caboose were coming to save the day, before cutting himself off due to being annoyed from having to do a second battle cry, telling himself to forget it and just go through, instructing Simmons and Caboose to come with him. Meanwhile, back in the Bard's cell, Griff, bored out of his mind, was singing in his terrible singing voice out of tune, nobody knows the trouble I've been in, nobody knows but Jesus, for no real reason, as Griff wasn't Christian, with Church begging him to shut up, with Griff angrily rebutting the Church simply couldn't accept that Griff had adjusted to life on the inside, claiming he was hard now, and in a stereotypical gangster voice, wanting to seem tough. Church, more annoyed by Griff than anything, responds, give me a break, not believing his tough act at all. Griff replies that he wouldn't expect Church to understand him, calling him a prison bitch. Meanwhile, Max Gain and the Sidewinder Reds are fighting someone in a huge firefight, loudly screaming at each other's orders and battle cries indiscriminately, as it sounded like they were not doing well. Church questions what's going on out there, with Griff suggesting that maybe their teams had finally come to bust them out of the cell, calling it a joint, with Griff doubtfully adding that he didn't think he could last on the outside anymore, claiming he was too institutionalized, still embracing this exaggerated prisoner persona. Church rebutted that it couldn't possibly be their teams, as the attackers sounded like they were winning, which would likely be impossible for the Reds and Blues. Just then, a salmon-colored guard from the Sidewinder Reds, unknowingly being the only surviving member, runs around the corner past the cell, only when Griff taunts him by asking where his buddies were, and if he was going to go help them, calling him screw and making pig noises, referencing the salmon armor. This motivates the guard enough to go help his team, only to find them all dead and get killed himself. Griff and Church hear footsteps as the killer approaches, revealing himself as he decloaks from his invisibility, which is likely what helped him murder all the Sidewinder Reds, as the white soldier from episode 40, who proceeds to greet Church, somehow knowing him. Church responds by shouting the soldier's name, Wyoming, asking him what he was doing here. This meant that the Wyoming that was hired to kill Tucker was the same person who killed Phil, and the person Wyoming talked to on the phone must have been the one who requested Tucker's death. In response to Church, Wyoming reveals that he was hired to do the job of killing Tucker, explaining how he had seemingly discovered info that someone else wasn't happy about. Griff, confused just by who Wyoming even was supposed to be, questions Church, calling Wyoming a cracker in the process. Church reveals the fact that he was just a soldier from the same division as Tex, causing Wyoming to remember her fondly, calling her dear Tex, suavely explaining that after he takes care of Tucker, who he calls Church's little friend, he'd be taking care of her as well. Unclear to Church if that meant murder or something sexual, but pissing him off either way, as he begins to extremely bitterly threaten Wyoming that he would do something bad to him when he got out of the cell, before getting cut off by Wyoming's rebuttal, in which he confidently states that Church won't get out, since everyone who locked him in was dead, and no one else knew where he was, laughing as he suggested that Church's only option now was to starve to death, not seeing it as a big deal as he cloaked once again and walked away with a departing cheerio. With Church and Griff now alone, Church urgently suggested that they had to find a way to escape, leading Griff to wish that they had bedsheets. Church, assuming Griff meant they could tie together bedsheets to climb out, reminded Griff bitterly that there was no window, questioning what good tying together bedsheets would do. Griff questioned who said anything about tying them together, clarifying that he simply wanted to nap on them, stating that if he was going to die of hunger, he wanted it to be in his sleep. Meanwhile, back at Blood Gulch on top of the red base, Tex, Tucker, and Donut were standing, looking at Sheila, who was down on the ground. Sheila wished the three of them good luck and to take care, knowing they were going on a mission, further stating that she packed them all lunches for the trip, somehow, with Tucker thanking her, stating how nice that was of her. Donut disagreed, reasoning that it wasn't very nice, as all his bag had was an air filter and a thermos full of brake fluid. Sheila then reminded the three of them to wash their exhaust pipes every day, despite being aware humans didn't have any, as Donut and Tex went through the teleporter, followed by Tucker, who said goodbye to Sheila, promising to come back for her soon. Sheila confirmed she would be waiting, now alone in Blood Gulch. Meanwhile, at the teleporter receptacle on Sidewinder, Simmons, Sarge, and Caboose had arrived through their teleporter and were waiting patiently for the others. Just then, Simmons stated they were coming through as Tex and Donut emerged from the teleporter in succession, completely unfazed, with Donut happily cheering yeehaw, stating how he knew he could fix the teleporter, adding that his hands weren't just for manicuring after all. Tucker then emerges through the teleporter in pain, screaming, "Ow, crap," and now having black armor identical to Tex's, leading Simmons to question what the black stuff was. Tucker, who hadn't realized the change in color initially, questions in disbelief why the fuck it was just his armor who had turned black, not Donut's. Caboose then excitedly responded by stating how glad he was to see Tucker, asking him to come closer so he could help him get the black stuff off his armor, specifying weirdly that it would be done by rubbing him all over. Donut, excited by the prospect of rubbing something all over, excitedly pleads for Caboose to let him help, with Caboose agreeing absolutely, calling Donut Admiral Buttercrust, still calling Donut other pastries. Meanwhile, still on Sidewinder, Wyoming is looking through a sniper rifle, through which he can see Caboose, Donut, and Tucker from afar, who are now outside the receptacle about to begin the armor cleaning. What they didn't know was that Tucker's armor being black was actually saving them, as Wyoming claimed to himself he didn't see Tucker, somewhat correctly suggesting that his allies may have disguised him somehow, admitting to himself how well played that was. As for what Tex was doing during all this, she was standing behind Wyoming, spying on him as he was spying on Caboose, Donut, and the disguised Tucker, happily proclaiming to herself, "Gotcha." Meanwhile, Sarge and Simmons, also somewhere outside the receptacle at this point, were chatting. Simmons questioned what the plan was, with Sarge explaining that the first step was to locate Church and defuse the bomb, and then they had to find Lopez so they could download the secret instructions that they needed from him, so they could get back to fighting the Blues. Simmons then added that they also had to find Griff, causing Sarge to respond with a single, "What?" pretending to not hear Simmons, leading him to reiterate, asking Sarge for clarification that they still in fact needed to rescue Griff. Sarge reluctantly responded that he supposed that they could accidentally find Griff on the way, excusing that no plan was perfect, insinuating that he really wasn't planning on saving Griff. Meanwhile, back inside the barred cell, Church revealed that he's had an idea to escape that he'd been putting off, warning that they might scare Griff a bit. Griff rebuttals that it wouldn't be that scary, claiming in his exaggerated prisoner persona that if he wanted to truly see scary, he should try showering in cell block C, stating the guys there were animals. Church simply replied with okay, but before he could do whatever he was planning, the cell doors miraculously opened on their own, with Griff calling attention to this, bitterly pointing out how Church simply opening the doors wasn't scary. Church, in disbelief, clarified that he didn't do anything yet, stating that someone on the outside must have opened the doors, despite all of the Sidewinder Reds being dead. Just happy to be free, Church and Griff round out of the now open cell, with Church exclaiming, "Let's go," and Griff yelling with pleasure about how sweet freedom smelled, suggesting they'd rob a liquor store on the way home. Meanwhile, back outside the receptacle, Caboose contentedly declared that Tucker was all clean, his armor now fully normal aqua again, with Tucker thanking him, but annoyedly clarifying to Donut that he didn't need to spend so much time cleaning the codpiece, the part that covers the fly, insinuating Donut's love for men, leading Donut to counter that a 3-coat waxing was simply his way of showing he cared. Unfortunately, Tucker's armor being clean meant that he no longer had a disguise, so Wyoming could see him clear as day through the sniper rifle, calling attention to this by suavely saying, "Well, there we are, mate," before being greeted by Tex, who held him at gunpoint from the side, warning him to stop pointing that sniper rifle at Tucker, who she called a friend. Wyoming only somewhat sarcastically responded with how good it was to see her, calling her Allison, insinuating that was Tex's real name, and sarcastically questioning her how O'Malley was doing, calling him by his alternative name from training, Omega. Tex knew it was a sarcastic question, as she knew that O'Malley was the one who had hired Wyoming, which confirmed that the bounty hunter O'Malley had hired for Vic was Wyoming. Tex suavely stated that Wyoming should know how O'Malley was doing if he was just hired by him, with Wyoming questioning how Tex knew. Tex vaguely replies that when someone lives in your head for a few years, you get to know them and who they know, bitterly questioning where he is. Wyoming, knowing Tex knew the truth, simply admitted that O'Malley would arrive shortly, clarifying very shortly as he watched O'Malley approach Tex from behind, holding her at gunpoint and cocking his gun. It's this sound along with O'Malley's signature evil laughter that informs Tex that he's behind her, as she annoyedly says, "Oh crap." O'Malley excitedly taunts Tex that she only now noticed that Wyoming had engaged in idle chit-chat with her as folly, only to give him time to sneak up, stating that evil wins and good could suck an egg. Doc, on the other hand, sincerely apologized to Tex, stuttering, as he mistakenly called her sir, intimidated by her masculinity, and corrected himself to calling her ma'am, followed by miss, leading O'Malley to tell him to shut up.